Hey everybody, welcome back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. I watched a movie, believe it or not. I almost never watch full movies, partially because most movies are trash. Second, because I just don't have time with all of my writing, doing this, etc. But, since I'm reviewing The Mandalorian and that seems to be popular, I decided to watch another popular feature that's out right now, which is The Irishman on Netflix. This is Martin Scorsese's new film. It's got Al Pacino, it's got Joe Pesci, it's got Robert De Niro, it's got Anna Paquin, believe it or not, who only has 7 lines, which is the new outrage of the week. But the actual emotional relationship between Anna Paquin's character and Robert De Niro's is actually really good, despite having those 7 lines. So I don't know what the fuss is about. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I watched it. It was 3 hours and 40 some odd minutes long, which meant I split it between 3 nights because I don't actually have all that long during the evening to watch these films. And I was satisfied with it. I was glad I spent the time watching this, which I was a little bit shocked about, just given things lately with movies. Now, Martin Scorsese came out about a month ago and said that all the superhero movies are absolute trash and garbage. This is paraphrasing him, of course. And people, went shocked. They're like, oh, how dare you? And this is a very interesting, analysis of the artistic culture right now, where everybody gets so outraged by an actual guy who's an actual artistic filmmaker talking about pop trash, which is actual pop trash, and calling it such is something that people can't even handle in their lives. So did Martin Scorsese, is he able to make a movie that is not pop trash? And I'd say yes, The Irishman is that. It's based on a book I found out about an Irishman who joins up with the mob, which is something that all of these guys in this film are known for making. The main character's name is Frank, and he gets some help with his truck on the side of the road by a well-known mobster in New Jersey, and eventually becomes really good friends with him and starts doing errands for him, and that starts being different kinds of errands as the film goes along. Definitely going to be giving spoilers in this, so if you have not watched the movie and don't want to know much about what's going on with it, definitely tune out now. So as that goes along, we see as the mafia empire builds, Frank goes into darker and darker of sort of errands that he keeps running for these guys. He hooks up with this guy named Joe, and what's the guy's last name? I'm bad with names, but he's a Teamster guy who is running a union, becomes the president of all the Teamsters unions, is shaking people down on behalf of truck drivers, and has a bunch of power with all the laborers, which then he's got a pension fund to deal with, which he does loans to the mafia with, and it gets really hairy in there. But everybody's making money and having a great time through the 50s and 60s. And it ties into some current events, which is very interesting. You notice, they're trying to get back into Cuba for casinos and all that, and the Bay of Pigs things happen, and everybody kind of gets shocked that America can lose. The Kennedys, who got pretty much put into place by the mob, then started shaking down the mob with Robert Kennedy being the Attorney General, and we see these events where people get where Kennedy gets offed, and it's implied that the mafia had something to do with it. And then Robert Kennedy loses his appointment, and the heat kind of dies down for a while. So there's a huge historical context to it. There's a lot of emotional drama to it. So it actually starts out where De Niro's character is in an old folks' home, kind of recounting what's going on in his life and having some regrets. And there are some slow moments to the film. I definitely think they went a little liberal on their time with this because they knew it was going to be a Netflix movie, not a feature, maybe, I don't know. And so they just put in scenes where people are just driving and it's quiet and they're talking about smoking cigarettes and things like that. But however, as much as those were slow, those felt like realistic life moments that actually did have some use to the characters for me. So I thought actually those worked pretty well. And it jumps in time for the first, I guess, half an hour. So you've got that old folks home. You've got him driving around kind of like in, I think, 1980 with everybody present. You've got him back in the 50s where he's like driving a truck, and it jumps around, and it takes a while for you to get your bearings in the film. which, I'm not a huge fan of. I wish it was a little clearer on that end at the beginning. But as the film goes along and opens up, that ceases to be a problem pretty quickly. Frank is involved in all sorts of stuff, and he's a guy who just knows how to do a hit. They explain how to do a hit. They explain his gun choices at some point, which is pretty fun. And it goes back and forth between different styles of mafia movie, where you've got your just like shock and awe, brutal stuff like you'd expect in The Sopranos or whatnot. You've got your like political drama going on, and you've got your intensely personal drama going on. So there's so much going on in this film. It's actually hard to break down and just like say this is the genre, this is the element of this that you're supposed to be looking at here, because they really went for all of it. And I think that's where it stands as a pretty good film, and this is where it stands as something artistic versus something that is a generic superhero movie or whatnot, that's using all the same tropes and using all the same garbage as all the last ones, relying on a lot of CGI. And getting to the CGI, there are elements of that here because they don't do it in the action so much. The action is actually pretty understated and pretty. It's the old school way of doing action. Like at the very beginning of the movie, you see blood splattering on a wall, and you don't actually see the victim of the crime there. And that felt very, Hitchcock-esque and very much a nod to the old school way of doing films. There is some gun violence, but it's not like the gun violence you see these days, where they're like running around the city and then they jump up a crane and then they jump across a building, and it's like something, a person would get killed just in the action of moving from place to place in most films. These ones, I mean, it's very much like, De Niro goes in, he goes into a little restaurant, he frets for a bit because he's a little scared of what to do. He goes pop, 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 and runs out, and that's a bit more, I think it's more emotionally jarring to see the characters act and react to those situations than have these like 20-minute gun battles. And second, it feels pretty realistic to like kind of what would happen if this situation were happening. So all good on that level. I think everything was pretty good. I did note, because the CGI did take effect because they used a de-aging process on the old times. So when you see the 1950s, Robert De Niro has his face constructed in a computer to make him look like he's 40 years younger or something. And that's fine. There's no real problem with the way it looks. But there is a problem with the action scenes. Like there's a part where De Niro is kind of curb stomping a guy, beating him up, and he definitely moves like an old man. He's not moving like a person who's 30, and that does impact that scene a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they could have put in a stunt actor to just like change things a little bit. They didn't. They actually, these actors wanted to try everything out and try to do this, and they did pretty well for the most part. But there's a couple little elements like that do stick out. The voices stick out a little bit, when they're 30 and they're 70-year-olds talking. So those elements are there. They're very small parts of the film. I don't think it detracts from it very much. And I mentioned earlier there's like an emotional element. You see that De Niro is really focused on his mob elements, and he's really focused on his doing the job and just getting it done and being the guy everybody can rely upon. And you see his family's kind of in the background of all of this. And what develops over the course of the movie is Anna Paquin's character, his daughter, kind of understands what he's doing for a job and really doesn't like it, and sees he's not there for her, and sees even though he's protecting everybody, he's really just like making for like a very nervous life for everybody, where everybody feels like they're walking on eggshells. And eventually she realizes that he kills it's Hoffa. That was the name of the Teamster character, is Hoffa, and she became close with that guy over the course of things, like he's an uncle. And Robert De Niro ended up offing him, which I thought was crazy. And I almost, that was the one part where it started getting into the plot where I was like, I don't know. And I'll talk about that. But I really liked the family emotional element and how it developed into the fact that then she hated him for the rest of his life and would not forgive him. And the end of the film, the last 30 minutes, is really him like reflecting, and it's in his old times, and his body's falling apart, everybody's dead. It's like, and you get this like, what was the point of all this? sort of vibe from the character. And I lost my family, I lost everything. Like, nobody's even going to remember any of this. And while that's a nihilistic message, and I had a problem with it on that sense that it was nihilism, and the guy's picking out his casket, and it really doesn't matter. It all feels so final, but he feels like he really didn't accomplish anything. I guess I want, at the end of the day, because these are villains who are doing terrible things, and they're not heroes, they're mobsters. I want them to feel nihilistic. I want them to have to repent, and I want them to have to deal with the fact that their lives really didn't have meaning because they just did terrible things. So while that nihilistic message is kind of there, you get that out. You get that sort of better message out of it, which is, these guys really did everything they did and have nothing to show for it, because they all got popped, they all got pinched, they all have their families hate them, and they're all forgotten at the end of the day. And that's actually, you want that. You want villains to reap the consequences of their actions. So it's pretty decent on that level. I guess from the Jimmy Hoffa killing standpoint, he was very close to Jimmy Hoffa for years and years and years, uncle to his daughter. The guy's trying to keep his political power, even though he's, getting older and causing problems for the mob, and the mob wants him out and just quit, and he just refuses to quit because it's like, I built this union's mine, it's my pride in my work, and that's what's most important. And he straight up says, they're not going to pinch me, because if they pinch me, they're all going down. And he warns them. Well, the mob doesn't like that very much. And they actually send Robert De Niro's character to then do the deed, which is where I found it kind of weird. I'm like, wow. At first you thought they were forcing him to go away so that they can do the deed, without him messing things up, because it looked like he had a real problem with it. But he followed through with his mafia all the way through, and he just did the job. He's the guy who did the job, and that's the character he is. No matter what the personal consequence, he's going to do his job that he feels like is the job that needs to be done. And it's a tragedy. It's sad. This is the one part of the film. I don't really like sad films or tragedies or things like that. I usually like comedies or super action things where the hero gets the girl in the end and things like that. But this was still pretty worth watching, even through the upsetting elements, because the characterization was just so good, the acting was so good, the directing was so good, and all the way around, it was a wonderful effort by Scorsese and company. So yes, on the artistic level, he's still got it. He did it right. He shows that films can work now, and you don't need to follow, I guess, the formula. And you can still use your artistry and still come out with something good on the other end, which is encouraging for culture. I think we've lost a lot of that in the last 20 years. I think everybody's relying on the CGI too much in action scenes. I think that they're using, just putting, George Lucas talked about this when Star Wars Episode 1 came up. It's so dense, They always make fun of that in the Plinkett reviews, where there's just crap thrown all over the screen to distract you from the fact that there's like not a coherent story going on. And that's what a lot of these superhero movies that Scorsese talks about have gone and delved into. So I think he has created something worthwhile, and it's a good film. If you like mafia films, you're going to like this. If you like heavy films that are political dramas, and you're also going to like this. If you want something light, definitely do not watch this. And that's going to be the synopsis there. Is it as good as Casino or Goodfellas? Absolutely not. There's nothing that's ever going to compare to those movies, so don't try. But it's a different beast. And I think for a film in 2019, this did about as good as it gets. So I'll give it a firm 9 out of 10, and I will see you on the flip side. If you like my reviews and all that, I'm a sci-fi writer. Go check out my books. My most recent is Justified, Saga of the Nano Templar on Amazon. It is a #1 bestseller, and that series is getting great reviews from all the readers. I strayed from the formula to do some artistry, and I think it paid off also. I'll put the link in the description down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to give as much cultural content as possible, try to make good reviews, interesting things from a writing perspective, and we do some great live streams with some other writers and comic creators and things like that, which are really fun. So I'll see you guys soon, and thank you for watching. Bye.